Welcome to Flat Earth Debate Live. I'm your host Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they are live, and there's also a PayPal, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Most importantly, if you'd like to join the discussion, simply mute the page you are currently watching, then click the link in the info box below this video to join the panel and express your views on the nature of Earth. If you do join, please don't swear. If you do, you'll be ejected, and if you are, please don't try to rejoin the stream using sock accounts. You'll be warmly welcome back on the next stream. Please also share the show on social media. Sharing the show obviously increases the live audience, but this in turn increases the chances of a more diverse panel, so please share the show on Facebook and Twitter. Now we are joined by Refracted Curvature, Adam Meakin, Righteous Force, Brian's Logic, Neil, 10th Man, and a whole bunch of people in Discord, so welcome one and all.
Good morning.
Yo, 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 yo!
Hey, good morning.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hey.
Wow, that's
Afternoon, everyone.
super enthusiastic. Very pleased to hear it. Let's do a bit of housekeeping. Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge, that's like a hill getting in the way, formerly known as Earth curvature?
Nope.
Any evidence that we can have gas pressure without the necessary antecedent of a container for the gas to press upon?
Gas pressure?
Without the container, can't have no pressure.
Go on, Owen, what were you going to say?
That's just that gas pressure without a container, but if we would like to test that, then the only way we could is by using a container in order to create a vacuum to try and then within it try to establish some kind of a gas pressure.
Correct.
But you'll need a container to try that.
Yeah, it works both ways. You can't have a vacuum without a container either.
Right, so you can't even test it no matter what.
Well, you require a container regardless. That's a fact. You can, but it doesn't answer the question in terms of the violation of natural law that is Earth in space. The gas we breathe would fill the space if the sky was a vacuum. Can you demonstrate that without containment? No, is what you're saying. Well, you need to have a container to be able to demonstrate that. How the world works.
An argument for containment.
Right, it's a paradox. How
It's not a paradox. You just need a container.
It's
It's not a paradox. It's an antecedent consequent relationship.
Yeah, but
Right, it'd be like saying
it
you
is.
can't have. It would be like saying that you can have steak without a cow as a claim, and then you could say to somebody, "Well, how do you get steak without the cow?" They could claim paradox, but that wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah, they'd say, well, you've got to have a cow to get the steak, but I'm going to say you don't need cow for filet mignon. And when you point out that I do, I'll say it's a paradox. No, you just need to have that cow if you're going to be eating filet mignon. But if you're not eating filet mignon, and you make the claim that you don't need to have a cow, hypothetically speaking, and then claim that it's a paradox when you've got one sat on your plate, it's nonsense. Likewise, if you say, well, I'm going to need a container to demonstrate gas pressure without a container, it's like, yeah, that's because it's an antecedent consequent relationship that's violated by the way that they claim the Earth works in space.
Right, but it is. I was trying to reference paradox, just like you need the R for terrestrial refraction, right? You can't have it. So you're going to need a container in order to demonstrate that it could be possible to have gas pressure without a container, but then that automatically defeats itself. So that is the paradox about it.
You can need a cow for that.
No, not at all. With refraction, it's refracting a geometric position to a non-geometric refracted position using an R value that's based on a geometric measurement. Ergo, you can't acquire the geometric measurement if the measurable thing you're looking at, the horizon, isn't in a geometric location to give you the R to refract it with. That is a paradox in their model. It's not a paradox, it's just paradoxical in their nonsense model. i.e. a contradiction. You can't have R to refract the horizon with R if you can't measure R with the horizon.
Right. Well, in the exact same sense, the thing counts in their model. If they try to demonstrate gas pressure without a container using a container, well, it's the same effect.
Okay, so you're saying...
Yeah, in itself, it's not a paradox, but it is a similar type of paradox for their model when they try that.
In trying to answer the question, they might leave themselves in a paradox within their model. I'll accept that. Fine.
Exactly. That was my point.
Hello.
Humble.
Hey, Humble.
I've just got a question then in this context, hopefully. Is Brian on?
Yeah, Brian's on. Go ahead.
Brian Logic?
Yeah.
Okay. He made a video about the sun that I had to go back to because of something else I was watching. And at the end of it, as he was reading on, I got the impression that he was saying that it wasn't a complete vacuum. He used another word to describe the vacuum, but it was underneath. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
What you're talking about is a low-grade vacuum, which is there. Yeah, low-grade vacuum up high. Yeah. We do have a low-grade vacuum. Yeah, that's correct. What else was your question?
Sorry,
question?
I don't know why I was shocked at the end of this presentation to find a vacuum next to air pressure. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, I'll explain it for you. See, the vacuum is created by the sun because if you go through the rest of the video, now I know more about that topic than I did when I made that video for that presentation. The vacuum is created via the sun because at 10 miles up, it's minus 51 degrees, right? But then the temperature starts to rise. The official claim for this is that it's the ozone layer. But there is no ozone layer because there's so little ozone, because its highest concentration of ozone is at 22 miles up. Now, ozone is technically more dense than the general air, but it doesn't come down because there's a rising in temperature after 10 miles. But the problem is this: most of our air, right, which is the majority of it, is oxygen and nitrogen, is constantly recycling with the earth every day. So that's 99% of our air supply is recycling every day with the earth. And then there's other cycles like the hydrological cycle and the carbon cycle and whatever else that are also recycling with the earth all the time. So because of the temperature gradient, it makes it impossible for any amount of gases to make it past 10 degrees or 10 miles up. But there is gases that make it past there. Now, I'm not going to go too long because it could be 10 minutes explaining this. But the gases that do make it past there, I'm getting to it. The gases that do make it past there, right? They are mostly the gases that do make it past there is mostly there's bromine and different ones. But the reason there's so little up there and there's such a gradient after 10 miles still, even though there's a rising in temperature, is because there is such a bigger space. So if you think 75% of all our air is below cloud level, now that's not 10 miles up, it's below cloud level. So when you go to 10 miles up, there's even a very low air pressure there, and that's minus 51 degrees. But the temperature starts to rise after that. But you must remember, between 10 miles up and 20 miles up, the temperature is still very low. So you're not going to have a whole lot of gas movement. And there's only a small amount of gas between 10 miles up and whatever 30, 36, whatever miles up it has to go. Because there's no measurement after that point. I don't even think there's a measurement up to 36 miles. I'm just saying 36 as a throw out there. I only know of measurements that went to 30 something miles with high altitude balloons. So what happens is that there's radiative heat that happens, and that keeps the ozone, right? This is official. The ozone doesn't come down because of the rising in heat. It causes the ozone to start to become less dense and rise. But there's only a tiny, tiny amount of ozone because there's a very, very small at 22 miles up, there's a very, very small amount of gas per meter cubed. So what you end up with is up high, right? Even though the temperature has risen, you end up with a low-grade vacuum up at 24 to 30 whatever miles. You end up with a low-grade vacuum to 10 to the minus 2, 10 to the minus 3 torr. So yeah, the vacuum is there, but the vacuum is only possible due to, number one, containment, and number two, the sun, which creates the whole thing. You can't have temperature, you can't have gas pressure, you can't have vacuum without a container. And as Arwen was just pointing out, there is no way to test whether it's possible to have without any of these things without having a container. So it's impossible to ever claim that you can have that gas pressure, temperature, or vacuum without a container, because to ever show any of these things, you need a container.
Right.
So you can't create,
In order to demonstrate, you have to find an exit to the container first.
Yeah, you can't. How do you not have a? You can't. The low grade, you can't have a vacuum without containment. If you research, I just give an example, something that you can easily research. Hydrogen fusion reactor. It's completely sealed. They evacuate the chamber. They insert a high density of hydrogen, and they heat the hydrogen to the point where it becomes plasma. But they can't hold the plasma with any solid container because it's too hot. So they use a toroidal field at the base of the container because plasma has electromagnetic properties or is attracted to a toroidal field. And so they hold the plasma in place with the toroidal field, which creates a vacuum in the rest of the chamber. Now, how do you have the gas pressure, which is the high density of hydrogen, the temperature that they need to create, or the vacuum to be there without that container? You can't. It's all created, but it's all created within the container, and our sky or our air or temperature and the low-grade vacuum up high, that's all created via the sun. The sun creates all that. That's the reason it is. And the radiative heat is, I predict, is the sun creating radiative heat off of the containment.
That's merely your speculation. Hold on. You don't know what the sun is. Let's just ask the question. I'm sorry, Humble H. Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
It's over there.
Brian's got it bouncing off containment and radiating stuff. I mean, no,
that it creates radiative heat. The sun, because the sun does create radiative heat. So the radiative heat is created via the sun and the container.
Yeah, but there's not even proof that the sun is multi-directional like that.
No. Right? Now I've listened to Brian again. He's correct, right? What he's saying is, in the same way you can't have gas pressure without a container, right? You can't have heat without a container. So he's saying you've got something that's the biggest entropy generator we know, the sun, right? And I think it's unreasonable to say you can't describe the heat as being radiated because it seems to be the case, right? So I'll give him that. And then in terms of reflected off, I don't know about that, but certainly you've got to have the containment to be describing the heat, to be describing the temperature, right, Brian? So from that point of view, I'll take it back. I stand corrected.
If I used the term reflective, I don't remember using that, but if I did, I didn't mean to use that term. No,
that's the only bit.
The sun is creating the radiative heat via the container.
Gotcha. Yeah, now you've clarified. I agree. Hold on, Owen. Now you've clarified. I agree.
Then there would be proximity to prove that.
The only word I took umbrage with was the reflected bit when you said reflected off the container. What's the container? Is it reflective? You know, and so on and so forth. But now we're both at agreement point, so we can move on. Unless Arwin's got something to add. Go ahead, Arwin.
Well, the thing about it's always typically said, "Oh, it's radiative," but that suggests that it's actually has an origin point, because radiation, like any form of heat radiation, it's always like based on an object from which it radiates within Euclidean space. But that's not, there's no proof of that. You don't go, we're going to the sun. Oh, we can literally measure the increase in radiative heat. No, you can't.
Okay, I agree.
At all.
It's only, we
find it absorbed at ground level. That's where it is.
Okay, again, I hinted at that. Hold on a second. Humble H wants to get a word in as well. Use this question. I hinted at that, Arwin, and
Yeah,
you're right.
I'm sorry.
But the same token, when you're just having a discussion about this aspect of heat in general, which Brian's now clarified, I'm willing to accept that description just for ease, as opposed to we could in every aspect of the sun, right, regardless of measuring angles, you can do this with every single aspect of it, even with the angles, because you get the same angles when you raise up in elevation. So, you know, without exception, unless you can name one, there's going to be something about the sun that when you describe it in any way, someone can come along and go, I don't know if I agree with that. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Totally.
Gentlemen, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Please, I'm just trying to get an understanding here, because I've been speaking to people, and I would say to them on this matter, you can't have gas pressure next to a vacuum. Maybe it's my understanding of the vacuum that Brian is talking about, but at the end of his presentation, I was left with the idea that there was containment, which we will discuss in a little bit if we can, containment, but inside of that container, there is something that can be described as a vacuum with gas pressure next to it. And that's my query.
No, definitely not.
No,
Well,
it's
no,
not like that. No,
Hold
hang
on.
on. Let me explain. Just give me a second. Let me explain. Because we have the sun, right, which it all starts with the sun and gas cycles, which are created by the sun, via the sun. That's the only reason we have a low-grade vacuum up high, because it creates the gradient in the first place. Now, there is radiative heat that starts after 10 miles up, but 10 miles up is minus 51 degrees. You must research all the gases and look at what they do past that point and that temperature. And you must look at how much gases are actually even getting to that point. So you have this massive area above, right, that has a lot more vertical area than the majority of gases work in. The majority of gases are below 75%, and I would say more. I would say maybe 85% of all gas is below cloud level. So you have this massive area above that of miles and miles and miles and miles for all this gas to spread out in. And then there is radiative heat that begins due to the sun creating a radiative heat. And what happens is you end up high where you have just basically hardly no gas, which creates the low-grade vacuum. But it's not just created all of a sudden. It's not like we have all this gas pressure and then a bit later we have 10 to the minus 17 torr. No, that wouldn't work. You couldn't have the 10 to the minus 17 torr without the chamber in the first place, or without the container in the first place. That's the problem. You can't have gas pressure and then this big vacuum of imaginable size, and that gas pressure not radiate into it, and to the point where we don't have any gas pressure here. That's not how that works. Because we have a temperature gradient. It's about what the sun does and the temperatures it creates. That's why we end up with that. If we didn't have that, if we had one solid temperature throughout the whole thing, then we'd have gas filling the whole lot equally. That's what would happen.
The
only reason is
but you can't have that. That implies a stop to entropy to have that circumstance, doesn't it? It's never going to happen.
Yeah. No, yeah.
But you can't prove that's actually caused by the sun because it rides with assumptions about it.
Correct.
But
hold on. We're never going
to.
Just let Alwyn make his point. Hold on. Alwyn's correct. Let him make his point, because that's correct. Just say it once more, because everyone's jumped all over you straight away, Alwyn. And you're right, and it's worth reiterating. That's why I stumbled around refuting Brian.
Right. So the idea of, well, this mystery, because it is a mystery that it is like the layers and the temperatures there are divided like they are, but you cannot prove that it's actually because of the sun, because you would have to have assumptions about the sun in order to lay that connection. And we don't have the evidence for it.
I don't have
it is
to have
actually in a
assumptions.
position.
All I have to know is that the sun creates the temperature.
Bad phrasing. Bad phrasing. Stop.
What's the sun?
It's not that the sun creates it. It's just that the temperature differential or the temperature increase or whatever you're describing with temperature does occur. Now, coincidentally, the sun's there when it happens, right? Yeah. So it's not a stretch.
No.
But that doesn't make Arwin wrong or you right when you directly tie it to the sun, when you don't necessarily know that's true. And I can't say it isn't true either. So this is a sticky wicket.
Hold on, there's a problem.
It's colder when nighttime.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There's a problem. There's a problem in all this.
Let John
How
go.
are
John's
we
been trying to get a word in
defining
for a while.
vacuum?
Hold on, everyone else. Just let John have his moment. Go ahead, John.
How are we defining vacuum conceptually, right? Are you saying a place where gas does not exist? Or are you saying a differential in pressure? Because I don't think any of us are saying that a differential in pressure can't exist within a dynamic system.
Correct. And
Yeah,
NASA define it that way. So the vacuum starts at sea level because what you are talking about is a difference in pressure. So how you clarify that difference is how they clarify and gradiate the vacuum from sea level up.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Go on, John.
So do I have a wrong idea about a vacuum then? So would I be able to, because I'm saying listening to everything that's gone on the debate so far, is that Nathan would use the term, we wouldn't be able to breathe.
right. Well, the
Right.
thing is, the question is, how do you have gas pressure without a container? Not how do you have gas pressure next to a vacuum?
Correct. I was going to summarize the whole discussion with that, but that's absolutely spot
So-
on.
So we can have gas pressure next to a vacuum as long as there is containment.
No, because of the way that the word vacuum has been defined, the vacuum defined by NASA on Earth starts at sea level. It's just how much gradation you've got up to 10 to the minus 17 torr in their description of what a vacuum actually is. So we're not saying that you can't have gas pressure next to a vacuum specifically for this reason. What you're required to have gas pressure at all, and I can demonstrate that we do have gas pressure, and the antecedent consequent to have the pressure that we're breathing is a container. Therefore, the sky vacuum without containment description in the heliocentric model is void. It's a violation of natural law. In those circumstances, the gas we're breathing at high pressure would fill the available space. So if you imagine an actual vacuum chamber, which we'll ignore within the confines of my housekeeping question in this regard, or our housekeeping question in this regard. So ignore the fact that to have the vacuum in the demonstration, we've got to have a container around it. That's how we'd overcome it if someone else on the fundy side put this example to us, but I'm using it for educational purposes, so I'm allowed. So ignore the vacuum container. But inside this vacuum chamber, we're going to say that there's literally no gas. It's completely vacated. There is none. Very unusual circumstance. But at the bottom of it, we're going to put a, skin flake sized item that's got containment. I.e., it's a tiny, teeny, weeny little piece of fleck of skin sized item, and around it is a tiny, teeny, weeny little container. Yeah? And inside it, there's a life form that relies upon having gas pressure to breathe. Right? You with me so far? Tiny little container in a big vacuum chamber. Right?
Yes.
What if that, let's say that inside the little tiny skin flake sized container, let's say you've got 100 gas particles bouncing around inside there. They're all bouncing around quite happily. The container's good enough to keep it within the confines of my example. When you get rid of the container, bearing in mind that inside the container there's 100 gas particles bouncing around off the walls and off each other, what happens when you remove the container?
That thing would die, I would think.
Well, it's
'Cause
more
all
the fact
air
that
would-
the gas, the 100 particles, just expand out in all directions and start bouncing off the walls of the next available container. Now, up until this point, I've said ignore the walls of the container, because what I'm suggesting in regards to this example isn't about them bouncing off the walls of the vacuum chamber. It's about the little organism I had inside this tiny little bubble that had 100 gas particles bouncing around for it to survive on. And the moment the containment's removed, they all disappear. Now let's compare that by scale to the heliocentric sphere Earth in a vacuum, and back away from it a couple of million miles, and go, check it out. That little dot, surrounded by this vast area, has got little life forms on it that lead these little particles of unbonded gas to stay in close proximity so they can breathe. In this example, I haven't even got a container to begin the example with for the organisms on this little dot in a vacuum to develop the gas pressure for me to make a comparable example when I remove the containment. Because in this example, the globe Earth example, the world would have never even developed gas pressure in the first place. Because the moment that example with a tiny little dot seen from a couple of million miles away in a claim to be Narnia land called outer space, you look back on it and the very first gas particle comes out of the ground and it just vanishes. It just carries on in whatever direction it's travelling at high speed away from its origin and never returns. Because it's never got anything to hit on and come back in the opposite direction. Because there's no containment in the heliocentric world. Ergo, we would have never developed gas pressure in the first place. I can't even come to terms with giving an example of how the gas we breathe would instantaneously vacate into the vacuum, because to give that example, I've got to start with Earth as a sphere with a container around it, which it hasn't even got in the model. So it's a ludicrous, absurd assertion, because we wouldn't ever have developed gas pressure. Make sense?
Yes. Listen, I want to believe, I would even go further. I need to believe in what I refer to as the biblical model, because I believe in the Bible. I believe in that containment.
That's not for the show.
I just never thought. Sorry?
That's not for the show. I mean, you're entitled to your beliefs, but here this is a different standard.
I'm just making that point for a reason. I am not trying to fight against this. It's just now when I've been explaining things before, I've never thought that I would hear something described as a vacuum inside of that containment. And I thought that's what I was hearing. Yeah. So maybe my conception of what a vacuum is, or the definition of it, is wrong, because once that vacuum is there, those molecules in my mind would always push into that area. So to me, all the gas molecules in the container will be hitting the container.
Yeah, they will. Gas fills whatever space it's got. Yes, that's correct.
So what is the purpose of the vacuum? It's spoken of as a vacuum. This is what I'm having trouble understanding.
But you're not, after listening to the rest of the presentation, and as I said, I know more now than I did then. You're not understanding the rest of the presentation. How can, right? You see, you have to understand, the majority of our air is below cloud level. Now, you could have clouds just 2 miles above, between 2 miles and 6 miles. You can have clouds, but most of the clouds are kind of 2 to 3 miles up for most places. The clouds will rise in the warmer temperatures because of the more warm rising air, and they'll be lower to the ground in the colder temperatures. But most air pressure is down here. So then you have this massive expanse that starts at 10 miles up, right? And it's minus 51 degrees at 10 miles up, we have to remember. So how much gas is getting past that? For the bit of gas that got past cloud level, how much gas is getting past 51 miles up? So what you end up with is a situation where you have more than double, right, the 10 miles. You have another 20 plus to 30 miles up above us, because that's all they can measure. They've never measured more than that. They've never measured anything higher than that. That's all they can measure. So you have this huge area above it, right, with very little gas, right, that's gradiating due to what the sun is doing with the ozone and bromine and other things. What it's doing, it's creating a gradient as it rises, even though the temperature is rising. But what's that rising in temperature from minus 51 degrees? It's minus 51 to minus 50 to minus 49 degrees to minus 48 degrees. You have to understand there is a rise in temperature to the point where you get to close on 30 miles up, and you're talking maybe +4 or +5 degrees, depending on where you're measuring as well, depending on what part of the world you're measuring from, where your balloon is going up from. So what you end up with, at the top, you end up high with a low-grade vacuum. But a low-grade vacuum is just, as John pointed out, is still just a differential in pressure. Vacuum, an absolute vacuum is zero, but there's no such thing in reality as an absolute vacuum. The lowest vacuum we can create in reality is created by NASA in the Sandusky, Ohio vacuum chamber, and that's 10 to the -6, which would be magnitude lower than anything we'd have up high in the sky. And you cannot have a vacuum, but you can't even define a vacuum, or what a vacuum is, without having gas pressure. And you can't create a gas pressure gradient without temperature. You can't have any of those three things without a container. It can't be done.
Okay.
There's no point in pretending we don't have a low-grade vacuum in the sky, because we do.
By the definition of
know about it.
vacuum, yes, we've got less gas as it's dispersed up. Well, dispersion means it's thinning out. It's created at ground level where you find the highest concentrations. Therefore, the higher you go, the more it's dispersed into the available volume. Add to that cycles of heat and water and all the other stuff we've got going on, and you end up with a very complex system. It's dynamic in nature. So everything's always moving, it's always in flux. It doesn't alter the law of nature governing gas behaviour bases itself around the fact that gases aren't bonded to each other. They're not holding on to a sphere Earth. They have to be contained because they move at a high velocity in all directions. Therefore, if there's nothing to stop them when they go up, which they do, they're coming from ground level, then they just carry on indefinitely into whatever space they've got. And if the sky is a massive vacuum, aka a space for the gas to fill, then that's what gas will do. It'll fill it. However, if you've got containment, you can develop heat cycles and water cycles and dynamic systems like we experience. But all of them have the same prerequisite. They must start with containment. In order to develop a gas pressure gradient, you first have to have gas pressure. So you've got to have the gas pressing on something for it to then turn into a gas pressure gradient. It's first gas pressure, then gas pressure gradients.
Okay. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Right, because we've spent so long on this, we're not going to carry on housekeeping. We'll do a concise housekeeping tomorrow.
Oh, sorry.
Go on, Humble. Was there
Good
something
morning,
else you wanted
guys.
to add? Hold on, let's just round out because I don't want constant interruptions. What was the last thing you wanted to add, Humble?
Oh no, it may get a bit extensive if I go into the next point. So thanks very much for today.
Just keep it under your hat till tomorrow or whatever. You know, it's just that we've spent a good 20 minutes on this, that's all. And we're going to do a bit more.
Got you. Thank you.
No problem. Our pleasure.
Appreciate
Just
it.
pop yourself on mute for the now. Thank you. So we're gonna can you pop yourself on mute, Humble H? Thank you. So we're gonna cover the second part. We did the first part last week of Professor Dave Explains YouTube channels destroying flat Earth without using science - part 2 : the stars. So this has been covered in the pre-show. So if you're a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, you can see this later on this afternoon after the show's been finished recording. Or if you're not, subscribe today to my second channel, Nathan Oakley. Although I did put these out over the weekend, so if you watched the main channel over the weekend, you will have actually caught what will be repeated tomorrow on my second channel. Just a weird set of circumstances where one of the videos didn't render correctly in the order I wanted it. But there we go, that's a different story. Anyway, we're now on to the part 2, and part 1 will come out on Tuesday. So for those of you who are subscribed to my second channel. But we're going to carry on with this. Hopefully everybody will participate a bit more, and I'm not as dominant as I was in the last couple because it was 90% me talking about this. So feel free to interrupt. I'll hopefully not bite your head off too much.
Is turning. Standing up north, whichever point in the sky is aligned with the rotational axis
You'll need an R value for that rotational axis. Over to you, John.
Well, the rotational axis, is he talking about the stars? Because you need a flat plane for that rotational axis, if that's what he's talking about.
He is. He's just got a depiction of a little whatever coloured man on the top of his globe Earth CGI rendering, with gas not filling the availability of volume in violation of the second law of thermodynamics. Did you hear that, Dave? This diagram is a second law of thermodynamics violation. If this black area was surrounding what we are breathing, that's high pressure gas, then we'd all be dead because the high pressure gas would expand out in all directions to fill the availability of volume. Bearing in mind I've had a PhD over a barrel, that's PhD Clown Thunderfoot, when he came back with a rebuttal that gas behaves like bonded bouncy balls poured into a fish tank. No, they don't. Clown Thunderfoot, and I assume yourself, don't understand how gas behaves, because you wouldn't be showing this diagram if you understood how gas behaves, because it's the second law of thermodynamics violation. That's why you'll never have any photos, because the photos would come from that area of space, coincidentally called space, a space that gas could fill in line with entropic law. Obviously, Dave's not an entropic law fan.
Well, what I was going to say is, if he has his depiction of a little man on Earth, of a globe, then there's no way to get the angle measurements from that surface. So he couldn't make that assertion to begin with.
Debunked every word of your last two sentences, Dave. Mainly because of the CGI image that you said your audience couldn't moan about. We are moaning about it though, eh? Because it's a violation of natural law and you can't get elevation angle measurements from this curved surface.
Would appear not to move, and everything else would rotate around it, just like we see.
Right, just like we see from the top of a globe surface with a man antipodal from that position down here at the bottom. Definitely not, Dave. That was your hemispherical assumption that we covered in the pre-show. Yeah, we don't live on hemispheres. Just because you say that when you talk about travelling south. When I travel south holding a compass, I just travel towards the horizon on a flat plane, and if I get lost, I can then use that flat plane I'm travelling across to measure the angles to the stars. Something you can't do on this CGI rendering, non-photograph, non-map, non-useful.
He also has a physical assumption bias concerning the stars. He's saying what the stars would do over a flat plane, as if he knows what they are.
In his straw man, that's correct, yes.
Standing in the south.
He's affirming the Kant's point.
Let's see if you can formulate it, Chocolate. Go ahead.
Well, he said, like we see, right? So you're just assuming that you make a statement, you make a claim, and then he's asserting that that claim is what we see because that's what we see. So therefore, a claim is correct.
He's saying, if the Earth is a sphere, P, then we will observe antipodal rotation of the stars in the southern hemisphere, Q. We do observe antipodal, anti-clockwise star rotation in the southern, begging the question, hemisphere. Therefore, P, Earth is a sphere. So it's an affirming the consequent formal logical fallacy. Well spotted, Chocolate. That slipped me by.
Same thing, but the opposite direction from their perspective.
Keep getting this mute button stuck. Damn you, mute button. Yeah, he's got this assumption about which way things turn, that when it was held up in a straw man false dichotomy, he didn't understand how just turning around would change your perspective of things, as he's described it here. But now he seems to understand it. Quite bizarre, really. Go on, was that John?
Well, I was just going to say, I didn't think he believed in perspective. He called it flirspective in the other video, didn't he?
I don't think so. Not that I can recall. Maybe I missed that.
Okay, maybe I might be stereotyping him. That's I'll retract that.
Well, he doesn't have perspective in his begging the question proof and nothing perspective hijacking Earth curve calculator, but he hasn't used this in this example, so.
Also, any star that would require a line of sight that cuts through the Earth is not visible because we can't see through the Earth.
You also can't take an angle measurement to the ones you can see on a sphere Earth because angles require two straight lines meeting at a vertex. Notice you've got a straight line to this star, going through a chord point. So you've got a chord line drawn through a sphere Earth, and you're saying that because you can't take a chord line, Well, even if this line between the point where you're claiming a physical geometric sphere edge horizon blocks your view, that'll be Earth curve. We've debunked that, by the way. Black Swan. Yeah, this claim is that the star is being blocked by a physical geometric limitation to this depiction man's view. So therefore, he's claiming Earth curve gets in the way. If the Earth was a sphere, as depicted in this CGI rendering, with a radius of 3959 miles, then every distance to the horizon measurement claimed to be blocking this star in this view could be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, and we have shown beyond certitude that the horizon claimed to be blocking this star in this depiction is beyond the geometric limitations of an Earth sphere radius 3959 claimed to be blocking stars with its physical geometric horizon. It isn't. So we've debunked this claim. Your shitty straw man for how you think stars are precluded by way of a geometric limitation at the Earth curve edge horizon is debunked. We debunked it in 2020, Dave. So no, definitely not. Meanwhile, when you calculate how much you can see with perspective of a star, you can draw out, is it longitude lines from Polaris to give you the circles? I always get this confused. Latitude lines. There we go, got there in the end. So those latitude lines have come from Polaris and the angles thereof, which cannot be acquired from a spherical surface. So yeah, pointing out where Polaris disappears from view when you're measuring angles to it, to give you maps, so you can convert them to spheres to then convert them back to flat maps. This is a really crap example.
That's why Southerners can't see Polaris and Northerners can't see the Southern Cross. But that's not all. Literally all observations of the sky from the Southern Hemisphere are utterly...
Hemisphere begging the question fallacy. So you've got a flat map that's actually a global projection. So, I mean, I'm going to say it's a failure as a flat map because it's come from a global projection. You've distorted it too much when you applied a Haversine formula to make it into a globe after measuring stars off a flat plane in the celestial sphere model. So this is a very distorted globe projection. And I'm going to assert that it only fails because it's a distorted globe projection. Ergo, the globe model fails after conversion from a flat plane. And the angles that this map does have a use for when you use it centrally out to the outside edge along those lines. So why are you drawing around it in this manner? Don't you know how this model works? This depiction with this red ring around it demonstrates admirably that it doesn't know how this model's used, how it functions, how an azimuthal equidistant projection is actually useful. Dave, you're a clown. Don't hold up these models when you don't really know what they are or what they're used for.
Inexplicable on the flat Earth.
Can I just
consider people stand...
Yeah, I will just add one thing before you do, Brian. On the flat Earth, no, this is a globe projection, Dave. You're telling us how this globe projection fails. Because it's a globe projection. That's what this is. And you're telling us how it fails when you reify it and put little men on it. The map is not the terrain. Look up literally the textbook definition of a reification fallacy. Hypothesization, if I could say it. Yeah? Making concrete that which is not. This isn't where you stand. It's a globe projection that you're telling the world how it fails. All right. Maybe you should get one that's globe-shaped. Oh, there aren't any. Because they don't work with angles. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Nathan. Actually, I'm going to point out just two things. One is that he made an assertion there earlier that you can't see Polaris from south of the equator and you can't see the Southern Cross north of the equator. That's a load of rubbish. You can see Polaris often from south of the equator, not maybe up to 120 miles south. You can't see it most of the time after that. People have said they've saw it more than that, but officially you can't see it up to about that distance past the equator. The Southern Cross you can see from the north. It can be seen from North Africa, the Philippines, Florida, Texas, all these places at certain times of the year. Because the Southern Cross, because I actually, when he had his debate with David Weiss, I had to go into the comments and correct them on several of his claims. One of them was to do with this. He doesn't know the difference between the Southern Cross and and Sigma Octantis. He doesn't know the difference between the two. He keeps thinking that's the Southern Cross. It's not. Southern Cross points towards Sigma Octantis and it moves around it throughout the year. He doesn't know what he's talking about there. And the second point was, on the AE map or the Gleason's map, that is half. Half of that is a flat Earth map. But it's the latitude and longitude grid is the flat Earth part, not where they place everything on that map, all the continents. That's not the flat Earth part. part of that map. That's the globe part that they've manipulated south of the equator to fit their globe. But the latitude and longitude grid, that's the flat out part. That's the part that's flat out. The other part is not. The other part is them south of the equator stretching things out and moving things around on an AE or Gleason's map, purely so when they decide to turn that flat latitude and longitude grid into a sphere, that all the continents like Australia and that will be the size they're supposed to be, as opposed to giving them their correct latitude and longitude positions south of the equator like they're supposed to do. But they didn't do that. They changed the latitude and longitude positions of all these places to fit the globe, as opposed to putting them where they should be, putting Australia where it should be, and it having the correct latitude and longitude position they should have. That's what they've done, and that allowed them to shrink the oceans, if you understand what I mean. So
yeah,
it's nonsense.
I've been watching your videos. I know what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Ending towards the southern tips of South America, Africa, and Australia. They all can see the Southern Cross when they look south.
Has he demonstrated this? Because this came up in debate when I was out on the circuit before Flat Earth debate existed. And I vaguely remember challenging a guy who put this claim to me to actually show this observation. He claims this is the case, but when has it been shown?
So does my son.
This was the very thing he got wrong when he was on the debate with David Weiss. This is the thing, one of the things, one of like 3 or 4 things I corrected him on in the comments of that video. His claim is completely wrong, right? It's not the Southern Cross. It's supposed to be Sigma Octantis, where 3 observers, one in Australia, one in South America, and one in South Africa, are all looking at Sigma Octantis at the same time, right? At the same exact time, not their exact times as in their clock times, but the same exact time they can all see Sigma Octantis. And that claim is a mathematical claim that came from the Glovers back in 2015. There must have been a better quality of Glover back then, because they got their claim right. It's not, the whole claim is based around one particular time of the year, because what he's forgetting about would be, because he's presuming that Sigma Octantis is the Southern Cross because he doesn't know the difference. Right? What he doesn't realise is that there's going to be night time in one of those places, or 1 or 2 of those places at least. Right? They're going to have night time somewhere. It's only one particular time of the year. I think it's for 2 days or something like that, where mathematically on a globe within the heliocentric model, people standing in those 3 locations should be able to see Sigma Octantis at the same time. Right, not clock time.
But has it been shown? Time. That was my original point.
No, it can't be. It can't be shown because it's purely a globe claim based around a globe and heliocentric model. That if we were on a globe and the heliocentric model was correct, then at this time of the year, for these 2 days, you would be able to see that. But nobody has ever shown it because it's not possible to be shown. And Anthony destroyed it years ago, because he went and he contacted the observatory in Tasmania and other places, I think, and they have to take magnetic declination into account when they're
I was coming to that next. This is Anthony Riley, right?
Yes, Sleeping Warrior.
Yeah, so Sleeping Warrior covered this and went into great lengths to figure out where these positions were, what their magnetic declination was. He contacted loads of researchers and, like you say, observatories and various other different things. It's all coming back to me now. This is a complete sham of a claim. Like, complete nonsense.
Yeah, and he doesn't even have it right. If you asked him, I bet you he'd say it happens all the time. Not even knowing it's supposed to only be 2 days of the year. He keeps on claiming it's the Southern Cross. It's not the Southern Cross. The Southern Cross moves around Sigma Octantis. It points to what they call Sigma Octantis, something you can't see with the human eye if it's there. You know,
that's what Tony asked for, I think, was Sigma Octantis. Was it the Tasmanian Observatory contacted, I think, Nathan, weren't it? And
Brian knows more than I do. It's Brian reminding me that sparked my memory.
But they didn't have an image for him when he asked for.
No, that bit I do remember.
Yeah, see, they've gotten into a bad habit. Dave is top of the list of this, of claiming the Southern Cross. And part of the reason they're claiming the Southern Cross Well, firstly, it's because they don't know their own claim, number one. Number two, they don't understand their own model and where the claim comes from. And number three is nobody can see Sigma Octantis with their eyes. I don't know if it can be seen with a telescope. I don't know if the thing is there at all, right? But I know that the Southern Cross is not part of the claim. Southern Cross has nothing to do with it. So
Okay,
any baller who's claiming the Southern Cross, especially Dave, who's supposed to be a professor, obviously doesn't know what they're talking about.
Okay, but let's summarise the purpose of the claim. The purpose of the claim is so he can beg the question of hemispheres. That's the only reason he's doing this. So he can assume antipodal positioning with these star observations. The fact that his assertion in the first instance isn't proven and is therefore a baseless assertion fallacy doesn't alter the fact that that baseless assertion fallacy comes alongside a hemispherical begging the question fallacy. So it's absolutely riddled, Dave. Let's move on, though.
And two of them at a time can even see it simultaneously, depending on the time of night. Does that make any sense with...
Depending on the time of night? No, we just covered that, didn't we, eh? So, what, is this an all-year-round thing that's never been proven and never been demonstrated but claimed to be only working in a heliocentric world every couple of days of the year? I don't think so, Dave. We've never been shown this. I've challenged at least one person to actually provide me with the imagery, and Sleeping Warrior has gone to great lengths to actually back their claim for them and failed. So unless someone provides us with this, and it would have to be your claim, regardless of us pointing out that you don't understand the claim that heliocentrists make, and you think this happens, what, nightly? Various times of the night? No, you're just an idiot.
These folks all looking
Actually, Nathan, just to go there, because this is more about why that claim is all screwed up. It used to be 3 observers, one in South America, South Africa, and Australia, right? South Australia. We're all looking at the same point in the sky. Now, when it came to the Southern Cross, there was 2 observers. It doesn't matter. The 2 observers could observe the Southern Cross. Like if you take in the angles to the Southern Cross and the times, depending on the time of year, 2 observers on a flat plane could totally observe the Southern Cross. If you take in the distances to the GP of any part of the Southern Cross, 2 observers would see it at some point of the year. One maybe South Africa, South America or something. Yeah, that could happen. Yeah.
Completely different directions. None whatsoever. Come to think of it, what does south even mean on a flat Earth?
Opposite of north? Out towards the horizon? Is this the lead into your begging the question hemispheric assumption being reiterated? Let's see.
It's totally nonsensical. But again, on a sphere, south actually means something. And
on a sphere, when you beg the question that south is antipodal from north, that's you begging the question fallacy. Saying that it means something on a sphere doesn't mean you've proven Earth's a sphere. It means you beg the question of Earth being a sphere. You'll need a radius value. You'll need a measurable geometric obstruction to that star in the example earlier. We've debunked both. Further to that, the pictures, CGI, computer-generated images, the ones you said we couldn't moan about, are depicting Earth with atmosphere, that sphere-shaped air around a sphere-shaped Earth, sitting in violation of natural law, not dispersing into a 10 to the minus 17 torr vacuum. Gas doesn't behave that way, Dave. It's not bonded to the ground. It expands in all directions to fill whatever volume it's got. And what do you know? This is a vast volume. Like, absolutely vast. Right? So this is nonsense. Your sphere Earth claim needs a geometric horizon, and it isn't possible in a sky vacuum. So it fails on every single front.
And all these people...
Nathan, yeah, Adam, are you available for something here you and me talked about on this point?
I'm here. I've just got back in, so I was missing what was being said.
All right. You remember when you and I looked at the globe image where they showed the Dingleberry and the equatorial plane, and they've got the equatorial plane east, west, north, and south. But on the sphere, north is up and south is at the bottom. And since the Nautical Almanac gets its origin of angles from the equatorial plane, that disk, they've got north at one end, south at the other, east and west to the sides. So go on, and then I'll comment.
Yeah. So as I remember, what when we do it on a flat Earth, there's no problem. The the plane in which we're navigating and that we're going to apply the measurements to is fine. And they're also commensurate with the north, south, east, west direction. However, when you take your dingleberry and you create your flat surface at the center of a presupposed ball, the polar coordinates are no longer relevant. They no longer match. You have to work the two separately. They're not commensurate with each other anymore, because what was north, south, east, and west is just now orientated along the wrong axis. If you want to, because you've gone from a flat plane that you've imaginally created, and you've put it at the center, and therefore the coordinates that work on a flat perf and are commensurate with the map are no longer commensurate with the globe.
Correct. Do you see this in your mind's eye, Nathan? What he's saying?
Yeah.
So when you're holding a compass at sea, you're holding it horizontally, and it's pointing north, and behind that would be south. When you look at a dingleberry, it doesn't work that way. It's straight up.
Yeah, but you wouldn't be looking at
plot the polar coordinates on the north, south, east, west. It can't be plotted on the flat plane you're supposedly doing your calculations for navigation on at the center of your presupposed ball. You can't put the north, south, east, west on.
I see.
It only works on the disk.
That's just one more thing. So what you're saying is, when you take a tangent plane and transpose it down into the center of a presupposed spherical Earth, it's not just that the globe that was Dingleberry, now Globurger, is surplus to requirements. It actually makes the whole process impossible. Am I right?
Yeah, because instead of being on the XY axis, suddenly north and south come on the Z axis.
Right. Fascinating.
Devastating.
Yeah, completely. I mean, obviously, this is much higher level than we're taking apart from Dave the Dingleberry, because he's not putting these sorts of cutting-edge arguments to us in terms of transpositions of tangent plane Earth with a Dingleberry dangling between, and then the equatorial plane at the centre with you standing in the middle of a globe Earth in the core. He's not putting those sorts of arguments, but it's interesting just by virtue of him putting a sphere Earth up on the screen and having a star blocked by a horizon that we start talking about these things, right?
Well, when you consider that all navigation is done by the altitude azimuth coordinate system, altitude is your elevation angle above the deck. Azimuth is direction starting from north clockwise. So north would be horizontal, and then you'd go 90 and you'd have east. You go 180, you have south. 270, you have west. And in between, you would have north, west, and southwest, and so forth. But the whole point is the altitude azimuth coordinate system is the navigational system. And azimuth is direction. And that's on the disk, not straight up. It's so devastating, it's crazy.
It is. Well, with that, I'm going to say, if you are watching this on either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley 1980 Premiering Streams, is that right? Nathan Oakley or Nathan Oakley 1980 Premiering Streams, then stay tuned, as there will be an after show to follow. Unfortunately, if you are watching this live, this is where we bid you farewell. So another massive thank you to all of you smashed the super chat, liked, commented, shared, subscribed, joined as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, and all that good stuff. And another massive thank you to today's Discord and G+ panels. Once again, stay tuned if you're watching on an after show. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!